Well, American officials have confirmed that they have signed off on the transfer of more than 2,300 bombs and 25 F-35 fighter jets to Israel. Now, these transfers were approved by Congress some years ago, but they're being implemented now. Officials are keen to point out that they are not giving Israel everything that it is asking for. But I think it's pretty clear from this that President Biden's domestic political calculation is still that it is better for him to help Israel rather than hinder it. And the quid pro quo that the Americans hope that they are getting is that the Israelis may agree to delay this long-awaited offensive on the town of Rafah in southern Gaza, where hundreds of thousands of Palestinians are sheltering from the bombing. But given that Israel says there are 4 Hamas battalions hiding in Rafah, using civilians as human shields, how sure can we be that Israel will wait?
So the bombing goes on and the weapons transfers go on. So does the humanitarian aid shortage, right? How acute is that?
Well, American officials are saying that just under 200 trucks a day on average are getting into Gaza, into central and southern Gaza. That's down from about 500 trucks a day before this war began. So it's clearly not enough. The American Department of Defense has released some pictures showing the latest delivery of aid from the sky. Several air forces, including the Royal Air Force, have joined in with this operation. But an American official has been quoted as saying that famine is, quotes, quite possibly present in northern Gaza already. In the meantime, the death toll, over 80 Palestinians reported killed in the last 24 hours alone, and the total death toll of Palestinians, over 32,700, according to the Hamas-run Ministry of Health.
OK, Jonathan Rugman, thanks very much for bringing us up to date. Thank you. Well, a little earlier, I spoke to William Weschler, who's Senior Director of Middle East Programs at the Atlantic Council, a US think tank. I began by asking if the bombs and fighter jets the US is reportedly sending to Israel is an effort by the Biden administration to influence the Israeli government's behavior.
I think what you've seen over the last really 2 months now is evidence of the Biden administration having significant influence on Israel. It was about 2 months ago when the Biden administration told the government of Israel that it would not support an incursion into Rafah in the current circumstances without a comprehensive and effectuated plan to remove the over 1 million innocents that had concentrated there. And over those 2 months, Israel has indeed not invaded Rafah as a result. There's a lot of bluster, there's a lot of talk, but at the end of the day, the proof is in the results. For the last 2 months, what the Biden administration wanted is what Israel has done. It's a very delicate game of diplomacy that the United States is doing, but it has proved effective, at least to date.
The US stuck its neck out and said this should be an immediate ceasefire. Israel certainly hasn't complied with that. Could withholding arms, or at least making them conditional, not be one big lever the US could pull to try and get Israel to do what it wants?
To be clear, the United States position is that there should be a ceasefire and there should be the release of all hostages that Hamas is holding. To that end, the United States has been very much involved in the negotiations that are happening through intelligence channels unsuccessfully to date to achieve those ends. That's the United States position. The United States position is not that there should be a ceasefire absent the release of hostages.
There's been a lot of commentary about whether blocking humanitarian aid is a violation of international humanitarian law. In the UK, Lord Cameron has suggested that might be the case. The fact that the US is airdropping aid into Gaza suggests that things are not going well on that front.
That is certainly true. The United States, the Biden administration has been very dissatisfied with the Netanyahu's government's approach to humanitarian assistance. Now, it's not entirely Israel's fault. There are a number of other countries involved in this, but it is also the case that the United States has concluded that Israel is not doing enough on humanitarian support, and as a result has not only done airdrops, but has announced a new maritime route, thus taking actions into its own hands to provide humanitarian relief to the Palestinians in Gaza who need it.
Do you think much of the rest of the world will hold the US responsible for what's going on in Israel?
Much of the rest of the world is already reacting in that and along those ends. Israel's actions, as legitimate as people in Israel believe they are, as legitimate as many in America think they are perceived very differently in much of the rest of the world. As such, the United States, as Israel's chief ally and friend in the region and the provider of many of the weapons, is definitely tarnished in the eyes of many as a result. The reality is that President Biden has done a real profile in courage in its support for Israel because he knows the downside risk. He knows the downside risk in perceptions abroad. He knows the downside risk perceptions at home. One only wish that that Prime Minister Netanyahu took as much political risks himself as Joe Biden is taking on his behalf.
While Israel is getting military support from the US, of course, this huge package of military aid to Ukraine has been blocked by Congress now for about 6 months. So will the US be responsible if there's a retreat in Ukraine as well?
Oh, if at the end of the day, the United States fails to provide the necessary arms to Ukraine for them to defend themselves against the attacks from Russia, then the United States will bear a tremendous amount of responsibility for the disaster that will ensue. One only hopes that the Congress, and let's be clear, the Republicans in Congress that are stopping this change their ways and eventually pass the needed assistance.
William Weschler, thank you very much for speaking with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much.